and welcome to the Love Rugby League podcast. I'm Matt Shaw alongside Aaron Bauer. As you can probably tell, I've just got back from Vegas because I look horrible and I have not slept very much in a long time, and that is where we are going to start. Aaron, you are going to have to drag us through this podcast today. But I suppose I've got to start on Vegas, haven't I?
Yeah, what is my excuse for looking horrible? I've not been to Vegas. I went to Bradford on Sunday. I just suppose
You have had a bit of an ordeal.
There's a joke. Yeah, I have had a bit of an ordeal getting here, but we're here. Vegas. Look, it looked fantastic. It looked like arguably better than last year with the colour the two teams provided. I know Wigan and Warrington did a great job last year, but Fremont in particular looked another level. I mean, you were there. What are your sort of takeaways from the occasion and takeaways from the event?
I was pretty. I'm not a very emotional person, but I was quite overawed by Fremont. It's what I know rugby league's capable of being, and that's what it was. You know, we have to fight and scrap for every bit of attention in this country. Where you're in Las Vegas, the party place of the world, and rugby league centre stage, and it's not just Fremont; it's down the strip. It's everywhere. You know, there's advertisements on the taxis, on the hotels. It really does take centre stage. That's what we want rugby league to be, right? We want it to feel like a sport full of rock stars, and it did do this week. Amazing. And what the best thing for Super League is, there is absolutely no doubt how valuable Super League is to that competition, to that event, because the fan event on the Wednesday, Super League clubs took over. You could see all the Aussie media like, what is going on? Fremont Street, the minute the Super League clubs have been on stage, the noise decibels went right down. I spoke to Peter Volandis, and he said, you know, they bring so much value to this event, and it's gone from. It feels to me it's gone from Super League going, can we be here, to the NRL going, we need Super League to be here, which is interesting then for the future and where we go. But an amazing event that if you can get there, look, it's expensive to go, it's expensive when you get there, don't I know it? You've got to go if you can do it.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it ties into what happens next now, because Super League clubs, and both this year, Hull KR, maybe not so much Hull KR, but I know Leeds made a bit of noise out of this is a loss-making exercise, the whole venture. Hull KR admitted that as well, but they saw the greater good, they saw the bigger picture in it, which I think the next two teams also need to do. I know there's a bit of conjecture about who might go and who might not go. We'll get into that shortly. Are we at a point now where Super League brings so much colour to the event and so much value to the event? I think a third of the crowd was Super League fans, wasn't it? Do we now need to ask the NRL, are you going to contribute to us coming to this event? You know, we're spending a lot of money, we're losing a lot of money getting here, and we can't afford to lose as much money as you guys. Yeah. Do you now need to chip in and help us get there? Do you think that's the next step now?
I think that will be the step, because we're getting to the point we've got to be realistic that not all Super League clubs want to go, or more can't afford to go. We're probably down to a couple. I mean, even, look, let's be honest, the talk has been for basically 9-10 months that St Helens and Hull FC will be the next two to go.
Because they were the last two of the big six that haven't gone, yeah.
But St Helens, we know, are losing a lot of money already. Yeah. Doesn't feel like a club that wants to lose more. And Hull FC, while they have owners with a lot of money, they are trying to run it like a business as well. They don't want to be making it. So how much energy is there from those two clubs? I don't think there's any doubt they both want to be there, but I think it has to look right, you know?
Yeah, I spoke to Hull in the last couple of days. I know there's been some speculation, some conjecture about Hull might not want to go. Hull want to go. Without a shadow of a doubt, Hull want to be there. I think they're just waiting to see the fallout, or not so much the fallout, but the bottom line figures from this year. They're going to speak to both clubs who were there. They probably can't admit it too much on the terraces, but the two Hull clubs have actually got an okay working relationship, so they will speak to Hull KR and see what the fallout has been, see what the cost have been. And I think after 2 years of the event now, Hull are almost in a position of just taking a step back and saying, well, let's have a look at the bigger picture. Let's have a look at how much this costs, because no one's going into it blind now. So Hull can almost plan it meticulously and know what it's going to cost them. And I don't think Hull are terribly bothered if they make a small loss, from what I understand. They're okay with going and it being a loss-making exercise because they've seen the experiences that Hull KR and Leeds have had this weekend, Wigan and Warrington last year. They just want to take a qualified position of, this is how much it might cost. Are the NRL going to contribute? I still think Hull will go. In fact, I'm pretty certain Hull will go and St Helens will go. Probably because, if we're being honest, Matt, they're the next two clubs off the rank, aren't they, in terms of who comes after them? You know, you would expect Hull to be right at the top of the list to go next. As I say, they want to go. St Helens, I believe, would want to go as well. It would be a Hull home game, I think, that they would have to give up. But there's no doubt they want to go, and there's no doubt they want to be part of it. And just seeing it on the TV, let alone being there, you can't help but want to be part of it, can you?
Yeah, you think about the other clubs in the comp. You know, the NRL want the big fan bases, and like Wakefield are growing their fan base, but are they as big as Hull FC and Saints? No.
Possibly not. Lee?
Not quite yet. Lee, but Derek Bowman's been quite vocal that he doesn't want to take them there.
Yeah.
You've got...
A Catalans an option. I spoke to someone about this over the weekend, and it was almost shot down to me that why, you know, Catalans. But if you think about it, you know, they get as good a home crowd as anyone else.
That's true.
You know, they get 8,000-9,000, which is what some clubs are getting. They would take a strong core to Vegas, and I also think there's an element of the NRL potentially being intrigued by that as well. You know,
it's an intriguing one because they do have a very, very good home following. Away following, not as good. But it's the cost of travelling every single week. As a one-off, would you do it?
Well, they did for Wembley, didn't they?
They did. They did. And they did, I mean, to a much lesser degree, I know, but Barcelona, Nou Camp.
Well, we'll see with Paris as well, won't we?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
June.
Yeah, that's probably a good indicator, but do they need to know by then?
Well, I'm sort of the understanding that it'll be boxed off long before then. I think this will accelerate quite quickly now both clubs are back, and you can get a bit of feedback from the trip and stuff.
Yeah.
The NRL, if we get this deal, which I'm sure we're going to talk about shortly, over the line, that then potentially comes into, do they chip in? Do they contribute a bit? I still think it'll be Hull and Saints that go. Any notion that Hull don't want to go is wide of the mark. Hull definitely want to be there. It's just, it needs to work for everyone. And I think, you know, I can see both sides of it. These clubs, over the last 6 months, we've sort of criticised clubs for not being prudent and not running as a business. We can't sit and criticise championship clubs for being reckless with their spending and then
100%.
criticise Super League clubs for wanting to look after the bottom line. So I think Hull will go. I just think they want to take a little bit of a step back, make sure it's right, and I'm pretty sure they'll be there.
I think Hull maybe have already been thinking, well, we can see what Super League brings, so we're not gonna throw ourselves at it and say we'll do there, we'll give up a home fixture for living. Let's see what the NRL will do for us before we say what we'll do for them. I think I think there was a few comments where they were maybe, I think it was at the fans forum they did, where they weren't overly committal, and I think maybe that just triggered a few people to go, oh, are they backing down a little bit here? Actually, I think they were probably just being a bit business savvy there, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it'll accelerate over the next few weeks with what happens with the NRL and Super League, which I guess ties into what you're going to say now about, you know, where are we at? What do we think the next steps are? Because from the outside looking in, Peter V'landys made some quite telling comments, I thought, over the weekend. It just feels like it's been going in peaks and troughs this for 6 to 9 months. It dies a death. You don't hear anything about it. We don't hear anything about it. And then, you know, V'landys did something before the Ashes, didn't he, where he sort of broke rank and explained Super League was a train crash waiting to happen, which was quite telling and probably accurate on some levels. It then goes to sleep again over the winter, and Peter V'landys has brought it to life again with Vegas. There were some talks over the weekend, weren't there, Matt?
Yeah, there were. I saw them happen myself, actually, down pitch side. Andrew Abdo and Nigel Wood were in conversation. I've seen a number of people say they saw Peter V'landys and Nigel Wood speaking. So there was a lot of talks. The sounds that I got from people who were kind of sort of around it is it's quite positive. The feeling is a deal will be done. There is an appetite. The RFL recognise that having the NRL on board strengthens their position with broadcasters, and ultimately we can talk about everything else all we like. That is what counts the most. And I think given that, a deal will be done because there is an appetite. Look, there are some clubs who are sceptical. And to a degree, I understand to an extent. But at the end of the day, what we've been doing hasn't been working. Let's not be overly dramatic about that. There have been some positive steps forward in recent years with attendances, TV figures, Things are going in the right direction, but there's no doubt that the NRL shoot them up. I understand the concerns about letting go of too much control, but I'm not sure I buy into the fact that the NRL should have total control.
No. However, I think my view might be slightly different to yours in that the game has almost drowned in a pit of self-interest for
100%.
way too long. And that is engineered and driven by the mechanics of how the power is given out within this sport, that the club owners are effectively allowed to have a controlling say. And I've spoken to people in Australia and I've heard people in Australia horrified because in the NRL and the ARLC tell you what to do. You know, if they say, we're going to bring a new club in, we're going to bring Perth in, that's what's happening. You don't get a vote on it. We're doing this for the greater good of the game. And I think if we are going to do this, there needs to be an element of trust that there is an authoritative body at the top of the sport that is making these decisions for the benefit of Wigan, of Leigh, of Huddersfield, of Hunslet, of everyone. I think there has to be an element of trust if we're going to do this deal. I think they do need a level of control that probably supersedes anything we've seen now, primarily because they have a track record that suggests they can deliver. You look at, they're about to sign a $4 billion TV deal, something ridiculous like that. So they know what they're doing. And as you say, Matt, this is all, we can talk about crowds, we can talk about social media impressions, digital, games on the road. This is all about what that TV deal looks like this summer. If that TV deal goes down, this game is in trouble.
And the expertise of the NRL will shoot all of those things up again as well. So,
and they have the knowledge of going to market with broadcasters. They've been to tender with multiple broadcasters. They know what the process looks like. And we, rightly or wrongly, Sky are a fantastic partner, but we need to get some sort of bidding war going here, because otherwise Sky will just bid whatever they think it's worth, not what they need to get it over the line. And the landscape of the broadcast market's changed since even the last TV deal. Streaming's taking off. Peter V'landys has spoke about hiving up their TV deal and maybe giving Origin to one network, certain NRL time slots to another. Is that something we can explore? Can we get multiple broadcasters interested? And I'm not saying we don't have the talent to do it at the big office, but gosh, with them on board, if in a month's time there's some sort of deal over the line, that just changes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I'm in complete agreement. That's a
sold. Very rare moment.
We're in. Well, let's move on. Transfers recruitment for 2026, 2027. We seem to be having a glut of ACL injuries. I go as far as saying it's an ACL crisis.
Yeah.
Which is horrible. You don't want to see it. But what it has done is trigger a bit of movement in the recruitment market.
Yeah. Look, there's two clubs now actively in the market for fullback. One is definitely in the market for fullback. That's Castleford Tigers. One is contemplating. They're going to go into the market a Hull after losing Will Price. I still think it probably will be for a fullback. There's a couple of names flying around from Australia. Cass are still trying to get some sort of quota exemption for Blake Taff. I understand it all revolves around what you'd have to do with his contract and things like that, because he's played a game this year. It is possible, but it creates complications potentially down the line, so they're umming and ahhing. Hull have obviously got the quota space now because Liam Knight's gone home. It's whether they go into the market for a forward or a fullback. The couple of names flying around. One is Ben Farr, a name probably not familiar to a lot of Super League fans. He was a Queensland Cup fullback of the year last year, played for the Wynnum Seagulls. Really well thought of. I'm of the understanding his management has been in touch with Super League clubs and said Ben Farr is interested in a move to Super League to go for it and progress his career. The other name that always gets thrown about, especially over the last 12 months, because he can't get a game at the Dragons, is Tyrrell Sloan. Now, I think you've said before, haven't you, that Tyrrell Sloan's been of interest to clubs. I think we're London looking at Tyrrell Sloan.
Yeah, once upon a time, yeah.
And Tyrrell Sloan would be open to a move to Super League, I'm of the understanding, but only in a short-term capacity. So he has no real desire to sign a sort of long-term deal in Super League. And I think that's put a couple of clubs on ice with Tyrrell Sloan a bit. He would fill a gap in the short term, but I think more and more clubs are starting to move away from that now.
Would that not work for Hull FC and Cass though? Because they've got I get we've cast the complication with Taft, but like Will Price is their long-term fullback, so would a year not work for Hull FC?
Maybe, or do Hull FC think, you know, we have a David Litton or a Logan Moy or someone like that we can actually trust for the next 6 months, and then Will Price is going to come back, and then what if hypothetically Hull think we need a back rower or we need a middle to replace Liam Knight?
Yeah.
And I actually think they probably do need a middle more than a fullback. I think they've got a lot of options who can go in at fullback. Even Hardacre as an option.
Yeah, I agree.
Romano would be a last ditch. They do have 3 or 4 really good options, whereas Cass,
Even Kemp,
yeah. Whereas Cass, I think, are more aggressively geared towards a fullback. I think there is a feeling that Fletcher Rooney in time probably will be ready, but obviously Blake Taft was here. Fletcher Rooney wasn't supposed to be their first choice fullback this year.
Yeah.
Sini did okay, I thought, on Friday night. He was probably above okay, he was good. But again, I think they see Sini more as an outside back, and is his long-term future at Cass? I'm not 100%. So I think Cass are more aggressively geared towards going for a fullback. But yeah, there's a couple of names floating around. Sloan is one. I'm not sure Sloan would happen, just because I think more and more clubs are starting to think long-term with their recruitment now, whereas a Ben Farr, a Q Cup player, is probably going to be far more open to a 2.5-year deal that they can get some roots down, get their career going. We've seen it with how many Super League players. I mean, you know, just skimming back to Vegas for a minute, Cooper Jenkins was the best middle on the field on Saturday night. He was a Q Cup player. He was playing for North Devils, wasn't he? And he now looks like an NRL player in waiting. Palacia wasn't getting much game time. No. He's one of the best middles in the comp now. So I think the Q Cup route is one a lot more clubs will go down. Again, without getting deep into the transfer market and the semantics and the dynamics of it, clubs now, English players command more money than Q Cup players because there's just so few English players on the market, especially if you look at positions like middles and stuff like that. Yeah. It's almost less of a punt now with 10 quarters to go and get a Caius Fartilli or a Caleb Uele, you know, and that's just Wakefield. But yeah, I think Ben Farr's a name that's one to track, definitely.
The league come into the equation because Bailey Hodgson, I don't think they've confirmed yet.
No.
But if he's an ACL, I know they've got Armstrong coming back, but his recovery's taken a long time.
Yeah, round 9 is the noise. So, you know, with a cup game in the middle, it's another 2 months, you know, so...
They're not blessed. Well, no, they're blessed with outside backs. But at centre, they're particularly short. And Bailey Hodgson, there was talk of him going at centre. I just wonder, you know, if they were to lose a centre now, and Hanley's been struggling, obviously, with shoulder.
They have Badrock, don't they, who would go in there. AJ Taus is in and around the squad. It'd be interesting to see who plays fullback for Lee this weekend, by the way. I mean, Keenan Brand is maybe the name that jumps out to me.
Do you put Gareth O'Brien there?
Do you put Gareth O'Brien there, yeah, with Adam Cook, who is struggling, by the way?
He is, but I was hoping this came up, actually. Look, he had a very poor game. But I also think, let's just give him a bit of time. Like, I always think, I think I've said this before, I always give him 10 rounds. I'll give teams and players 10 rounds. He is struggling. He had a very poor game on Friday. But
I think the thing is, subconsciously, we're all judging Lee's overseas recruitment quicker because over the last couple of years, they've shown that they can get it right quick, haven't they? I mean, Isaac Lee, who jumps out last year as one who hit the ground running straight away. It was about this time last year, Offa Hangawi came in through the door. He hit the ground running. He was fantastic. So I think subconsciously we just judge Lee's recruitment a little bit early. When you're right, there probably is a little bit more patience to be had. But that's a big game this weekend. They've got Catalans on Friday night. And, you know, they're good at home, Lee. You know, they won their opening home game, didn't they? So Catalans have not been travelling well at all in the last couple of weeks. So there's a couple of games this weekend that scream significant. I know it's round 4, isn't it? I don't want to get too hyperbolic, but yeah, it's going to be a big weekend.
Finally, facts are back.
Yes, good news for you.
Good news for me and everyone of Halifax, including you, Aaron.
Yes, I do. Live in Halifax.
I think a lot of credit needs to go to the people who've got this done because there's been a lot of work to get done. And as we speak right now, Tuesday morning, it hasn't got final approval, but all the sounds are that they will. They've done everything pretty much they need to do. There's a meeting today. They've then got to put a squad together. We've just put an article up of them. The 14 players were still free agents. everyone just assumes they'll re-sign. Not as easy as that. They've got to renegotiate deals.
Yeah.
So there's still lots of work to be done before Sunday. But it looks like they're, in however which way it happens, they will get over the line. And look, great news for Fax, but it is good news for other people as well, the players, the supporters, and well, the bigger argument is it good for the game? It's very hard. It's quite a controversial conversation that. But yeah, they are back, and I think credit needs to be given to those who have been able to get it over the line.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is getting Kyle Eastman
Yep.
over the line, because look, that from what I knew, there was some doubt about whether that actually was definitely going to happen. And Kyle probably rightly was taking a step back, like Hull FC right at the start of this podcast, taking a step back and just wanting to assess things. He's in. He committed over the weekend, which is really big. And I know people will look at the game being London this weekend and think, oh, that's a horrible start. But I actually go the other way, because I think, not sure any Halifax squad was beating London at any point this year, if that makes sense. And while, you know, they're only going to have a cobbled together squad, aren't they? Let's assume most of that 14 re-sign. They'll need another 5 or 6. I don't think it's out of the realms that they might dip into the amateur game in Fax and get a couple through the door. They will borrow from Super League clubs. They had Lawford already, didn't they? That could easily come back. Cowan, yeah, they've got a good relationship. Kyle's got a good relationship with Saint, so you might see a couple of fringe lads coming through the door. Stevens was close last week, so he might be after a game. I just think that's not a bad game to have this weekend, because it allows them just to get up and running without any sort of pressure over result. If they were playing a team in and around them in the Championship, would the people of Fax turn up and expect to win and then leave feeling flat if they weren't able to win on the opening weekend? I just think it's a lesson for the game, and it's a bit of good news for the game that Fax have been able to turn this around within inside 6 weeks, and it shows that there are people in the town and people in the game that still think Halifax are of value. But it's a real lesson that if Halifax can go like that, anyone can go. You know, I think it's a lesson in prudence, a lesson in financial sustainability, and hopefully it's going to become a thing of the past anyway. It sounds like we're going down the route of a champ salary cap. 400, 500 grand is the rough figure being spoke about, which is probably even still too high for a lot of clubs. There's not many spending that anyway, but it's when they walk out on the field on Sunday, hopefully it's just a bit of a reminder to everyone that this could be you next.
I'm just not sure if I agree with the champ salary cap.
No.
Well, the reason is this. Look at London, right? And look at the teams that have transitioned well into Super League. Lee, the most recent example, and Wakefield. They spent money to build squads that were very close to being ready to compete in Super League. If you put the cap on, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then we get back to the how do you compete the year after?
Well, and this is a debate that maybe might not appease a lot of people, but let's say hypothetically London are a Super League club next year, and you go to, I don't think you go to 50. I just don't think you go to 50.
I don't.
The bottom line is nobody knows whether it's 14 or 15 yet, because it depends on the TV deal.
Yeah.
The TV deal goes up, it opens the door for 15, and it opens the door for London to come in and then have a bye week for all teams. If the TV deal stays the same or goes down, I'm telling you now, and you will agree, I'm sure, Matt, there are a lot of clubs in those corridors of Super League that are not agreeing to split that pot 15 ways.
Not.
Bear in mind, 2 of those clubs already this year are on half central funding, so they are going to want full central funding next year. So you've got to find another 1.3 there. Then you've got to find another. Well, then you've got to split that 15 ways. I just don't see that happening. But the point I was making was, if London come up, is that it? Where's your next Super League club? And I know there'll be fans of Widnes and screaming at me, but who is ready now? And is that not where you go down the route of bringing in some semblance of financial sustainability to protect the integrity of the comp? Have some allowances if you want, have some marquee allowances, but the priority for the Championship, I think now, having lost 2 clubs in a period of time and got one back, thankfully, and we'll hopefully get Fev back next year, is making sure this doesn't happen again. And it's almost like having a child. If they can't be trusted to spend the money
no, I understand.
sustainably, they have to be looked after. And I just think if you were to lose London from that group, where is your next big spender?
But the problem is you don't know when an investor's going to decide to just pump money into a club. Like Wakefield never saw Matt Ellis come in and then he came. Do you know what I mean? And then if they go, it might put investors off going into any of these clubs because they go, well, it's going to be so hard to A, get to Super League and then B, stay in Super League. So that's, I do agree with some sort of cap. But I think if you can prove that you've got the money to spend more and you put it in directly into a bank, you should be allowed to spend it, something like that. But that is probably a conversation for another day because we are at the end of this show. Thank you very much for listening again. Hope you're enjoying it. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you keep seeing all of our content. I've been Matt Shaw. This has been Aaron Bauer, and we will see you again very soon. Take care.